Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guest, well, first of all, you should recognize our guest. We have Monica back on the podcast. It's been about 9 months, and so much has changed for her since then that we're going to talk about. I mean, she was our first Hall of Famers on the podcast. She was inducted in the INBA PNBA Hall of Fame. She also won a mixed pairs gold competition with her husband, and I mean, just everything. She competed in a Galaxy show, and, we're just here to talk about what's been going on for her since then. But Monica, before we get started on that, I always ask every single one of my guests, what's the weather like where you're at right now? We know you're in Texas, so just don't embarrass me too much because I'm all the way up here in the frozen tundra that is Minnesota.
Well, first of all, Ryan, thank you so much for having me back. I had such a fun time when we did this. And I think we were talking just before the podcast, even, what was it, about 9 months ago? And yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say lots has changed, but I've added a lot on, which is great. And the weather, well, it's a bit cloudy today, but it's still in the upper 50s. So still doing pretty good compared to where you are, but not as great as I visited my sister a couple of weeks ago in Miami. And oh my gosh, December 80s, was out on the beach for a few hours. That's incredible. So that's something to be jealous of, no matter where we are, I think.
I'm not even going to get into it because we're below freezing and we're about to enter that, -10, -20 range in a couple of weeks. So everyone, watch out for that. But I mean, you were inducted into the Hall of Fame. When did you find out that was going to happen, and what was that experience like?
Oh my goodness. As you know, we've talked a couple of times before, and I'm a pretty talkative person, but that was the one time that completely shut me up, and I had nothing to say because, I was so honored and humbled. It actually happened back in June when I was told I was competing at the World Championships in Greece, which was fantastic. This was the third time that I've competed abroad over the years. Brought back another world title championship, which was really, really cool. And the president of our federation, Denny Kakos, his family is actually from a small island off the coast of Greece called Zakynthos. So a lot of those competing were invited to go and join over there afterwards. We were at this amazing dinner that his whole family had hosted. And during that time is when each year there are about 4 or 5 individuals that are going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, which happens at the Natural Olympia, the pinnacle of natural sports, that is in November. And so they were announcing the different names: a gentleman from Germany, a lady from the Netherlands, a few others. And they talked about this one female who had come through the amateur and then the pro ranks, and, started talking. I was next to my husband, and then I saw a couple of the daughter of Denny Kakos turning her phone towards me. I had no idea until they mentioned my name. And it was huge. It was amazing. Not only that, but to be among other Team USA members in the home of the president of the federation in Greece, where, when you think of Olympics and Olympians and things like that, it was just magical. It was very special. I'm very honored. There are 5 different pillars that embody, who gets to do these things, being dedication, spirit, loyalty. All those things are part of it. And it happened in November during the Natural Olympia at the awards ceremony for all the athletes on the Sunday after the 22nd Natural Olympia just about a month ago. So it was fantastic. It was really, really good.
That's so awesome. And being the history buff that I am, please tell me that you at least went on some sightseeing when you were in Greece.
Oh my goodness, yes. And what was so amazing is 30 years prior, my husband and I, after being married for 5 years, I don't know if I told you this last time or not, but we left everything and went backpacking for 2 years around the world. And so Greece was a place that we had visited, but this was back in 92. So to be able to go there in, 2019 and see just the history, and it's just so beautiful. And some of the beaches. So you have everything. You've got the beaches, you've got the history, you have just so much tradition, and the food. That was amazing, especially after competition, being able to go and enjoy all the Greek delicacies was absolutely great. So it was magical and special.
Yeah, that just, I mean, you're just almost bringing tears to my eyes now, being in this weather and, talking about the beaches on Greece. But one thing that I found interesting, because if the audience doesn't know, I mean, I review the podcast of the guests that I have on again. And when I was watching yours, I mean, throughout your competition history and throughout your journey, you've dealt with a lot of injuries. And when we were talking previously before recording, you were talking about how this last year, since the last time we talked, I should say, you've had a lot of injuries, or you've had some injuries to deal with. What have you gotten through, and what's that process?
Very, very good point, because I think I mentioned I had both my ACLs were torn very early on. My first ACL, it was a martial arts injury. I was 20 years old, and at the time, I was going down to the University of Texas at Austin, which is where I graduated from. And I went to the health center, and they said, oh, well, you're 20 years old now. Actually, you're not really going to be that active for that much, another couple of years or so. And I mean, I couldn't believe they were telling me this. And they said, in those days, if you can walk, it's better not to get surgery, because they didn't know how much they could or couldn't do. Well, 5 years later, actually, when I was in Greece, when we were it was about 8 years later, when we were in Greece with my husband, because of so much overcompensation with the one knee, the other knee completely tore as well. So I had 90% torn ACLs, which over time, for the past, 28 years I've lived with and really strengthened. That has to do with adaptability. You can do anything that you want to do, and the body is an incredible thing, because the mind tells it what to do, the body will follow. And so I had learned to, number one, getting a black belt 5 or 6 years after I'd been told I would never do martial arts again was huge. And that's why the bodybuilding lent itself so easily, because bodybuilding, it's very specific movements that you were doing, not like my sister, who's a ballet dancer, lives in Florida, had me do a class of hers, and my knee was contorting all over the place because of those side-to-side movements. She said, now I know why you lift weights, because you can do that, and it's a very straightforward movement, and you can strengthen the muscles that are around the knee or other areas. Well, about 4 years ago, I finally actually had ACL surgery on both. And it wasn't because I had decided to, but my son, who was a soccer player at the time, blew out his knee. The insurance was an ungodly $12,000 for the deductible. It was crazy, but that meant anything and everything it was a family insurance. And so I said, if I'm ever going to get it done, this is the time, and I've got to do it before the year's out. So I had both ACLs done. The left, perfect, great. The right knee is actually worse now than it was before the surgery. And there's some other things. So it was after last year's Olympia, or the 2018 Natural Olympia, I started feeling really bad pains in my knees. Had an MRI done, and meniscal problems, certain inflammation, again, ACL, all sorts of things going on. So I had a decision to make for this year's season. I either competed and left my ego aside, knowing full well that I probably wouldn't be at my very, very best, but let's see what happens with adaptations, etc. Or I could have just left it aside, had some surgery, or gone to take care of my knee. Well, I decided to compete, and I really didn't tell. Last time we were on the podcast, I was actually having those issues, but I didn't say anything to anyone. And I said, you know what? I'm going to see what I can do, no excuses at all, and how I can adapt. And that's where, for example, nutrition and diet played a huge part, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to rely as much on working my legs the way I wanted or needed to get the quad sweep, to get, the glutes a certain way. So that's where diet really, really came in, and adapting in the gym as to what kind of exercises I did. So winning in and defending and having a third title in Greece was huge for me, because I wasn't expecting that. I came in the best that I thought I could with all these other limitations. But to be honest, I probably brought my best package yet. Same thing then going into the Olympia. And so, yes, it was a tough year, and that's why all of this means that much more. And now I think in 2020, it's time to take care of that knee, I've got some bunion issues as well, so I absolutely hate those high heels. And while in the NPC, you don't have to use high heels and physique, in the INBA and many of the natural shows, only bodybuilders don't wear heels. Physique competitors also wear heels, except for during their actual routine.
The heels are always the bane of a lot of the existences of the guests that I have on. So yeah, we hear that all the time.
I sympathize, definitely.
But you're actually the first guest that I've had on that's been done mixed pairs before, and I've always found that interesting. It's something when I started having bodybuilders on, I started to look up what the whole sport entailed, and that was the thing that I saw, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. And a question that I have for that is, we talked about last time how hard posing is, and how it's such a trying process. But what is that like to go on stage, and you're also relying on the posing of another person as well, not even just on your own? What is that like?
First of all, mixed pairs is an amazing division, and I wish the NPC would bring that back as well. Right now, there are very few organizations that offer mixed pairs or couples. And it is, it can be anything you want it to be, in the sense that it's supposed to be that a bit more fun. But at the same time, you either have couples who are fantastic and do very serious, maybe classical posing and really get into it. You've got to be really, really good to pull that off. And you have other couples who say, hey, we want to do this together. We want to have a bit of fun. And they may not be as synchronized as some others, but it is such a crowd pleaser. And it is so wonderful to see. I have seen married couples. I have seen just mixed pairs coming from trainers and clients. I have seen mother-son and pairs as well. So it's such a neat combination of things. And my husband and I have been doing it. That's, I think, the way that I was able to sort of reel him in and pull him into doing the bodybuilding, because that was my thing. His thing was the martial arts and boxing and all sorts of other things. But it was nice to be able to be together. Now, I do have to say, and I love the routines. That's the part I really, really enjoy. And there have been times when, we've thought about maybe getting divorced or so. He's like, oh my gosh, if you make me do this again, or it's knowing your partner. He's a great martial artist, but he's not a dancer. I'm a great dancer. So it's trying to find routines. And we've done that where we've even used certain martial arts moves or certain things and incorporated that into the bodybuilding. There are certain bodybuilding, because it really is bodybuilding, but doing it synchronized in pairs. And the most important thing is that you are both doing the motions together. You're in sync as you're going. And having that couple that really, the whole symmetrical side of it too. Sometimes you will get this huge guy with a bikini girl, or you'll get, the girl that's very, very muscular and a guy that might do physique. Unfortunately, most of the time, the bigger guy usually gets it. It should be a little bit more, you have to look at both of them. How are they synchronizing? What is their routine like? And those are pretty fun to do as well as to judge. So we've been doing that for a while. And this year it was really a lot of fun, amazing to be able to get the gold, the two of us. So that was very special for me, not because it was just me, but because I was sharing that with my partner. So that was almost more than maybe the gold that I got for an individual in Worlds.
I remember the first time I actually saw mixed pairs, it was a mother and son, and I was just fascinated by that. And yeah, I really do think they should incorporate that more, because I really think, first of all, the training and the diet might be a little bit easier if you're doing it with someone else. And I really do find that interesting. But I mean, no one's going to know this because I'll release this probably about a week or two after we've recorded it, but we are January 2nd, everyone, 2020. So it's the day after New Year's Day.
We'll have a few Christmas things back there.
We still have a few Christmas things. We still have some down in my basement as well. But I mean, one of the biggest things in the health and fitness lifestyle are the New Year's resolutioners and New Year's Day. And it just becomes, the gym can somewhat become a madhouse. And I'll show one of your posts right here where you got to the gym early before it even opened up and you were waiting for it. But as someone like me who just works out at home, where I'm lucky that we have equipment at home that I use, what is the gym like on New Year's, and what is that like, just getting a whole new bunch of people in there with their New Year's resolutions and knowing that a lot of them will not see it through?
Mm-hmm. It can be crazy. So January will be a crazy month for the gym. And then unfortunately, February, like, wait a second, where did everybody go? It's funny that you mentioned, you're right. I did put a post, and when I walked into the gym on January 1st, it's sort of greenish because I guess they were just putting the lights on. So I was like, wait, is my camera broken, or is it almost looked like a night scope or something. Now, that was almost by accident because, to be honest, I would have loved to sleep in on New Year's Day. And part of that post had to do with always finding the positive to something. So my husband had to go up. He's in Seattle right now doing a medical course, and he had a flight out at 7 a.m. on New Year's Day. So I thought, man, I'm taking him to the airport at 5 in the morning. I'm up already. I might as well start my day and my year right by going to the gym. The gym wasn't opening until 7 in the morning. It was 6:15 when I got there to the parking lot. I said, okay, I'll rest in the parking lot for a while. So it was my way of even telling people, sometimes take whatever circumstances and whatever situations that you have and turn them into some of those positives. I probably would not have definitely wouldn't have gone at that time to the gym, and may not have even gone on January 1st. But because I had all these other things, I turned that into a positive and said, okay, we'll start the year right. When you're talking about New Year's resolutions, it's the same kind of thing. I tell a lot of my clients, I say, you know what? Start thinking about those New Year's resolutions several months before that, because they have to be habits and things in your life that you want to change. Not something that you say, okay, it's January 1st, I've got to choose something which will be, weight loss, or I want to get more out of my day, or, all these things that we do year after year after year, and they really don't mean that much because we do them for a couple of weeks and that's it. Instead of thinking New Year's resolution or diet for 30-day challenge or 60-day, think of what are some of the habits I'm going to do to change my lifestyle or to incorporate into what I already do and what my lifestyle is that I will then be able to maintain throughout the rest of the year. So it might be, instead of I'm going to lose 20 pounds this year, it might be, well, what are some of the things that would help me lose that 20 pounds? That might be eliminating sugary soft drinks. That could be not eating after 8 o'clock at night. That could be, well, I'm going to, whether it is doing exercise at home or going to a gym, because there's so much that you can do with what you have at home, I'm going to spend 20 minutes or 40 minutes 3 times a week doing something physical. It's those kinds of things, as opposed to saying, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. Well, yeah, but how are you going to do it? So it's taking some of those specific steps on and easy things that you can incorporate into your lifestyle. And that's how you keep those resolutions going on for the rest of the year, as opposed to just that first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, month, and then I'm tired of that. We'll do that next year again.
I mean, I always get a little sad when I see all these people with the New Year's resolutions, and I always say, like maybe 10% of you are maybe going to actually see them through. And it's just, yeah, if you really have the goal set ahead of time and that mindset, I mean, you being a bodybuilder know better than anyone else. If you have that mindset, you can accomplish anything. So, I mean, that's just such an important aspect. But one thing that we briefly touched on last podcast was the one training technique that I really discovered when I really got interested in weightlifting is time under tension. And you talked about that briefly last time. When did you get introduced to it? And for, anyone out there who isn't aware of it, could you just explain what that is and how it benefits? Because so many of my guests just swear by it when they come on and they talk about their training techniques.
There are many different ways to train. And when you first go to the gym, you think, okay, you have an exercise, and then you're going to do X amount of repetitions of that exercise, and you're going to do those for maybe anywhere from 3 to 5 different sets of however many exercises that you're going to do. What most people do when they go, let's say if they're doing a lat pull down, so they're just coming up, reaching up, and coming down, they'll just go, okay, I'm going to do 10 or 12, whatever. Time under tension, what that does is you are slowing things down. And time under tension could be, for example, I'm coming down on a 1 second or 2 second, but then when I go back up, I am going to really tense and hold that. And as I'm going back up, do that for maybe 3 seconds on the way up. what you're doing is you're spending more time with even that one repetition, but your whole body is tense. So you're holding that position. And that can be with any part of your body in any exercise. What that does, you, instead of doing 15 repetitions, you may only need to do 7 or 8 repetitions, but you're actually getting more of your muscles are working more with that period of, because you are really focusing on what your muscle is doing, on the tension that it's putting on. And, I think by doing that also less injuries occur, and you're getting more, your muscles will be able to develop that much more, and you're doing it a bit at a slower pace. You're having that muscle mind connection so much more.
Do you still use that for your areas that you had injured where you said, because I'd imagine, if you're really flexing it and really tensing it, that might do bad for that, but have you found that it's still effective for your areas that are injured?
Definitely, because what you can do with that also, I find, I tell people now, I used to lift heavy, or there are people sometimes that they'll see muscles on anybody. Oh my gosh, what can you bench? What can you squat? And I look at it and say, I really don't know. There was a time when I paid attention to all of that. Now, well, number one, of course, if you're a power lifter, if you are an Olympic lifter, that's a little bit different. As a bodybuilder, you are going that much more for the aesthetics. And I find even some of these big, huge guys, and I look at them and they're using 20-pound dumbbells or 25, pound plate. Of course, they will go ahead and do their huge, huge amounts too. But most of the time, there's so much I tell people that you can do with a 10-pound, 2 10-pound dumbbells. Once again, whether it's time under tension or doing over the top repetitions, I can be so pumped or so sore with a 10-pound weight, much more so than if I were to use max reps, because then you're forcing it and you're going fast as opposed to really taking that time and feeling the muscle. So especially if you have injuries, you don't want to do things willy-nilly fast or as heavy as you can. You want to go even less than what you can weight-wise, but take your time in doing it so that you are being able to work out the entire muscle and the entire area without hitting on any injuries. Sleeves were an amazing thing for me. Now, when I work out, it doesn't matter if I'm doing legs, arms, anything else. I wear a couple of knee sleeves, and I do it on both of them just to keep things tight. And it's not the kind of sleeves that power lifters will use that they wrap around and literally have to take it off after each rep they do because it's so tight. No, these are tight enough that I can wear for hours at a time. I take them when I walk the dogs, because I've got a wolf dog, and I've got, a couple of really big dogs. They're beautiful, but they can pull. And if I'm pulled off balance with my knee, that might not be too nice. So having those knee wraps really, really, those sleeves helps a lot too.
I was going to say, just explain time under tension. She's getting pumped up and she's almost going to break out of that jacket. Jesus. I mean, it's just something that I really discovered, and I really just find so fascinating. But you also mentioned, and this is awesome because I love having CrossFit guests on as well, because I always find that so fascinating, because it's just such a different style of working out, and their bodies look so much different than, bodybuilders or people that are just really into health and fitness. And you mentioned in the last time that you were on that you had a little foray into CrossFit. How did you get interested in that, and what was that experience like for you when you were doing CrossFit?
When I did CrossFit for a couple of years, I actually even competed at one of, not the games, but, locally we had our CrossFit, and that was so much fun. I did it with my eldest daughter, who at the time was 15, and, she really got into it and loved it too. I got into it, well, a long time ago, I got into some of the exercising more because a little dog sort of came into our home out of nowhere in the summer. And my youngest was finally going to kindergarten. I said, okay, now I'm going to have time for myself. And all of a sudden, this dog showed up. It's like, oh my gosh, now I've got to walk a dog every morning. This was about a year or two before I started bodybuilding. A local CrossFit opened up in our town, and we met the owner, and one thing led to another. Oh, why not? So I went over there, absolutely loved it, especially This was after many years of having all my children and not being involved in working out much. So that was the initial side of it. Interesting that you mentioned that, because last night I ended up watching on YouTube. One of my daughters put me onto it. There was a women's challenge. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but they had the CrossFitter, they had the bodybuilder, they had the power lifter, and then they had the weightlifter. And Dana Lynn Bailey was the representative for the bodybuilder. And I think this was pretty recent. It was only a couple of months ago that it was done. But they had different challenges to see which one of them might excel in this, that, or the other. The CrossFitter ended up winning the whole thing. And a lot of it was because, yes, there's that the cross of different exercises. The thing with CrossFit and the difference between CrossFit and what I do, and I had to give up CrossFit then, after 10 years now, I would be able to do both, is because CrossFit, you're doing the least amount of exercises that involve the most amount of muscles. Whereas with bodybuilding, everything is so specific. Every exercise I do is for a small portion of a muscle. Or sometimes people in the gym say, oh, why are you doing a curl this way as opposed to the other? I said, well, last week I did the other. This time I'm doing it this way because I'm trying to get a tiny little strand that is somewhere else on my bicep, for example. The only thing with CrossFit that I would suggest to everyone, you have to go to a really good box, make sure that the instructors there know exactly what they're doing, because so many people have messed up their shoulders or messed up certain parts of their body, not because CrossFit is necessarily bad, but just because of overuse maybe. One of the beauties about CrossFit is you never know what your WOD is going to be that day. And sometimes because they're trying to confuse the body and not have the body do the same thing over and over, or have, well, twice a week we're going to do this, twice a week we're going to do legs. You could go for 4 days in a row, maybe doing shoulders or doing something else, and that can be too fatiguing for the body. So once again, you've got to know your body, know when enough is enough, and have a really, really good instructor. But that goes for whether it's CrossFit or bodybuilding or anything. Definitely have a trainer if you want to do something that you're not used to, or you want to take something to a different level. But you've got to know who that is, get along with them, make sure that they know their stuff, and make sure that they know you. Here's another thing, because, I mean, I'm 54 years old. A lot of times I'll get a few clients who will be my age or a little bit older, and they say, well, you know, I've tried a lot of trainers who are in their 20s, and they don't know how to get around the knee or the shoulder or the arthritic one thing or another, just because, and part of it is because they don't have the experience with that. And it's just an age, or somebody who has had issues with a certain body part. Once again, it's important, know who, and figure out what your purpose is, whether it is CrossFit, whether it is bodybuilding, weight training, whatever. What are you doing it for? And based on, you know, is it for an individual sport? Is it for a team sport? Are you going to, are you a salesman who's in the car all day long going from one place to another? So where does your nutrition and your exercise or physical ability fit into the purpose? What do you need it to do for you? And based on that, you can figure out where and what, you know, or even like I always talk about the lifestyle side of it. Well, if it doesn't fit into your lifestyle, if you can't go out with your friends and have meals because you say, oh, I've got to be on this diet, or if you can't go to, I don't know, special occasions, vacations, friends, that's an issue. A friend of mine, Vicky Dias, who is an IFBB pro, I'm sure you've had Vicky on your show or so. I admire her extremely. And she told me that I'll always remember, because we train at the same gym. And she told me one day, she said, Monica, if my family knows that I am on prep, then I know I'm not doing it right. And I thought, wow, because that means that what she is doing is not affecting those loved ones and anyone around her. She's doing her thing, but she's also participating and doing with others. And I don't know how we digressed into that, but
I mean, believe me, I was going to actually make a highlight reel of all the times on my podcast that people have just, that's why I love that's why this isn't scripted. That's why I don't love to, just whenever people, hey, I'm coming on, do you have any questions or whatever? I just like, it's just natural. It's just flow because you never know where it's going to go. And some of the best moments that I've had on here are because of stuff like that. So I love that. But yeah, CrossFit, that's a thing in and of itself. I always call it a healthy cult where it's a healthy cult. It's not like one of those other cults, but it's such a, it helps benefit so many people. And I do think it's weird though that, you have countries like Iceland and Norway that just dominate it if you look at their population size, just such a small percentage of people, but they just really seem to really take those sports to heart. But yeah, it's again, out of the thousands of ways that people use to get fit, because we were talking about last time, it's like your Instagram name, it's fit for your purpose. It's all about finding out what works best for you. I have friends that love to do yoga, friends that love to just run, friends that love to work out. Not everyone's going to love, doing a bodybuilding workout. Most people, it's just all about finding what works best for yourself. But a question that I love to ask you, because with your clients, and especially since we just got past the holidays, what is your go-to, or what do you like to do with them when it comes to their food that they're tempted with during the holidays? Because let's be honest, I overindulge myself every holiday, but what do you say to your clients if they come to you and they're just afraid that, hey, I don't want to overeat too much during the holidays?
I think the holidays aren't necessarily as difficult as what many people think they are. Because when you think about it, and it depends on what your traditions are and where you're coming from. But starting off with Thanksgiving, for example, oh my goodness, turkey, great protein. Sweet potatoes, great. We'll do Brussels sprouts or green beans. Those are amazing and awesome. It's just a lot of it is watching the portions. And then, yes, it has to do with the sweets more than anything else, because when you start adding the chocolates and when you start adding the cookies and the pies, that's something that you really need to be careful with. And also with the alcohol, but there are ways to look at that as well. So, try to stay away from that beer, but a skinny margarita or a bit of sangria here and there, that's okay. Again, in moderation. Christmas time as well, when you're looking at your proteins, yeah, go ahead. There's tons of protein that you can have out there. Same when you go to a restaurant. And nowadays, it's fantastic because you can go to a restaurant and you can see, they tell you the nutritional values. So a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to get a salad, or I'm going to get, this chicken looks good. But they're like, wait a second, how many carbs are in that? And a lot of it is because of some of the sauces or the salad dressings. And so now it's made it easier for us to even look, and something that you thought may not be as good is better for you than something that you thought, I'm just going to stick to these salads, that might not be as good for you. When it comes to holidays also, I say if you're going to parties, don't go on an empty stomach. So many times we'll have a party, and so you'll say, okay, I'm not eating all day long so that I can go ahead and have everything I want, or I'll double up or triple up at this party. Well, what happens then is by the time you get to the party, you are so starving because you haven't eaten anything all day that you just go, I'll have a little bit of this, have a little bit of this. You just pick, and you don't know until later. Something I tell everybody, first of all, never go on an empty stomach. So have your meals still, your small meals that you're going to have before that big special party meal. Drink that water, and especially before you're going to have a meal that you think, man, I could really overindulge in this if I'm not careful. I always keep a shaker with me, have 32 ounces of water, or that water or green tea. I don't drink anything other than that pretty much before, so that your stomach is already slightly full, even though it's not with food, it has something in it. Don't try, take a little bit of the dessert. Once again, don't not allow yourself to have some of those treats. Everything has to do with balance. And I know that I can go slightly overboard. For me, the Natural Olympia is the end of the season. And so it's like, wow. any competitor will tell you we do go overboard, especially in the beginning of our career. And then we learn how to say, wait a second, okay, I'll do this for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Then I'll go back to a more normal, balanced, healthy, just lifestyle. And that doesn't mean having just chicken and asparagus and broccoli for every meal. There's a lot of variety. It's just knowing how to do it and what you can cook and using spices. I use spices to spice everything up. And contrary to popular belief, salt is not bad for you, but it's what kind of salt you use. Pink Himalayan sea salt, I salt everything with it. And that's a great way to do stuff. Pepper salt, Mrs. Dash is a great, non-salt alternative if you want that too. But there are a lot of things that you can do during the holidays. Don't think negative, oh man, what can't I eat? It's more like, okay, how can I prepare this? And how am I going to pace myself each day during the holiday season as to what I'm going to have? Today, I'm going to focus, maybe I'll have a few extra desserts. Tomorrow, I'm going to really focus on a little bit extra of that protein. The next day, have some of that sangria or that special punch. Perfectly fine.
I cannot tell you how many times I had to learn the hard way about, not eating all throughout the day just before I go to a party. I've learned that the hard way multiple times. So that's one thing that really hit home for me. But yeah, and also, just enjoy it too, because I mean, if you really are going through the entire year without, having some fun and, eating some good food, I do feel sorry for you. But yeah, I think everyone just needs to, again, in moderation, like the main theme that what we've talked about, as long as it's in moderation, I mean, it's okay. But you mentioned before we started recording that you're planning on taking a few years off just to, work on things. What is one area of your body that you want to improve most in this time that you're taking off?
Well, first, what I want to do is I want to get my body good. I want to get my knee. I'd love to get that bunion. And once that happens, I always, my shoulders and my back are my strong points. And it's always for me is trying to figure out those quads, how to get them more defined. I think I suffer from what many women do is our legs don't cut as much as what we'd want. So definitely once I can get that knee sorted, legs are the big part there. Maybe, I don't know. I always try to think, I love doing shoulders. I've had some shoulder issues too. So it's how do you find ways to improve those. But one of the big things that I do want to do, I had the pleasure of judging this past year, and I would love to be able to put a little bit more of a stamp on the sport when it comes to helping set some of those standards, especially in the natural arena for some of the judging, how to make things better for the athletes. So that's a huge thing. I want to guest pose, even though I'm not competing. I always try to keep myself anywhere between 8 and 12 weeks out of stepping on the stage anyway. That's when you talk about balance and things. That's a thing that you can do as opposed to the way you see people on stage. That's a 24-hour thing. But you can keep your body very, very much within that 8 to 12 week period out. And that should be something to strive for when it comes to lifestyle.
I mean, you read my mind perfectly. I was going to bring up judging in the next question because I've had a few people that have, judged a few shows, but no one that's really done it for a while. But how did you get into judging? And after, people are always so fascinated when I have, comments down below or guests that I have on how the judges score their events. Could you explain to also how that works, how you guys maybe tally the vote and decide who wins, what that process is like?
A lot of that depends on the federation, and the only federation that I've judged for is the INBA, PNBA. And I know that they do it a little bit differently in the NPC. And so now there are a couple of things, because this could be a whole show in and of itself when it comes to the judging aspect. And I think number one, it's so important for judges. How do you qualify to be a judge, and who's qualified? And you get judges coming in from different federations and different areas. They're all different. So the most important thing is knowing, what the criteria is, not only for the athletes, but that the judges know exactly what the criteria for that division is, for that federation. Because if not, they're judging based on, it's like journalism. It's supposed to be objective, but it can be so subjective. At the end of the day, you're choosing based on a criteria, but it's how you interpret that criteria as well. And so somebody who is judging physique versus judging figure versus judging bikini, there have to be very specific differentiations. What's happened in the past is you'll see crossovers between, for example, figure and physique. And it's happened in the past where your winner in physique will also be your winner in figure. That's not supposed to happen at all, because you have two completely different criteria. Even though the body in the judge's mind may be, wow, that's the winner, you can't, if you're going to allow the crossovers, you have to judge separately. And that's what over the past couple of years, they've been really trying to incorporate within the INBA. So whereas abroad, we were told, and I've competed both in physique and figure, and we were told in advance, you do both. Not that you will be penalized, but don't expect to get a similar placing or the same in either one, because the judges have to make a decision. So this past year in Greece, whereas I usually physique is my thing, in this case, I got a first place in figure and a second place in physique, which I thought was a wonderful thing, because it shows that the bodies have to be different. Of course, you're comparing with who else is there. Many times, the big thing with judging also is size versus conditioning. Some judges will judge just whoever the biggest person is, which again goes with a mindset as opposed to looking at the criteria. Others will just look at the conditioning regardless of the size. I think conditioning is very, very important. And anybody can have size, but may still be 4 weeks off from competition because they haven't dried out enough and they haven't brought their fat down to a specific level. Those are things that I think really need to be taught in judges' clinics so that everybody is on the same page. I've been on a panel where all of a sudden a couple of people went really just for the size, whereas a few others were going for the conditioning. So the judges really need to be on the same page. Finally, another thing when it comes to judging is if you are a judge for a specific category, you should not have any clients that are in that division. And you'll see that a lot. This past one, I actually judged, it wasn't the Galaxy I competed in, but it slips my mind right now, but competition I judged before that, I had several clients of mine that were in the competition. And so when it came to their specific categories, I completely removed myself from the judging. I was honored to judge, but at the same time, I should have no say whatsoever, even if I know that I can be, and I would always be extremely objective, but I don't believe that that's right anyway, just in case. You never know. And you don't get that sometimes. So I don't think that I think a judge should be able to judge in a competition where they have clients or they know people, but not when those people are on stage.
Well, it's great that you did that because, yeah, I've always said that one of the biggest complaints that I get, because I ask a lot of the guests, what is one thing that you'd change about the sport of bodybuilding if you had the chance to do it? And a lot of people say that, if you were to compete in back-to-back weekends, one week they might want you super, super lean down. The next week they might want you a little bit fuller. And it's like, good luck changing your body over that 1 week to meet the standards. So yeah, that's a big complaint that we hear. But if you look at the history of bodybuilding, it seems that it's always ever changing, whether it's, the size or the condition. Where do you think that the sport is going to right now when it comes to maybe leaning a little bit more towards size or a little bit more towards condition?
I think in general, especially within the NPC, it's definitely size. I've seen that over the last few years competing. And what they've done now is added more different divisions. So this coming year, you're going to see the debut of wellness, for example, which is a new division that's coming out. The only thing I wish that they wouldn't have done away with bodybuilding. And I think you're seeing a bit of women's bodybuilding. I think you're seeing a little bit more of the women's bodybuilding coming because there's a specific type of body, very, very close friend of mine, that is who she is. And when they took that away from a lot of the competition, there's still a few that will have the women's bodybuilding. But what happens then? Women whose frames are built for bodybuilding are trying to come down to physique. Well, what does that do to women's physique? You get these huge women's physique competitors. And so some of the truer women's physique competitors then need to come down to figure, and it goes that way. And even in bikini, you're seeing girls that are bigger or more muscular, and that's where you've even divided up in bikini, sort of the beach body versus bikini. And depending on which federation, there are all sorts of different classes that are going on with that. Now, I understand promoters and I understand organizations wanting to find something for everyone, and it's also a financial consideration for them, which is great. But that's why it's so important to set specific criteria so that the athletes, like you're saying, you're talking about New Year's resolutions or things. I'm going to come out with some of my clients now who I told at the end of last season, I said, okay, you're done. Don't want you to think about it until the end of the year, and then start processing in your mind, what do I want to do next year? Where do I want to go next year? Taking in the feedback from, let's say, judges' comments and this and that, and let's figure out which shows, what time of year, and what direction you want to take it. Because that's another thing too. Judges may tell you, you need to be more X, Y, or Z, or you belong in this or this or this category. But then do you want to go there or not as an athlete? Do you want, and that you have to make those choices because you're going to train a whole season for a specific look, which, like you're saying, if you're doing 3 or 4 shows in a row, whatever you chose to do, that's where you're going to end up. And when you're doing back-to-back shows, if anything, you're just going to get leaner and leaner with each show. Once you start, if you have 3 or 4 months in between, that's no problem. But when you're doing, one show, then 3 weeks later, 2 weeks after that, that first show will probably be I don't want to say your heaviest, but will be a certain condition. And as you continue on, you're going to get leaner and leaner, and you can't put that muscle back on.
I've seen so many people that have come on where, they've had their show season basically last months upon months. And if you look at from the start to the end, I mean, yeah, you can't get bigger. I mean, especially once it gets closer to that show day. But I mean, the world of bodybuilding to so many people is they just can't comprehend it. What would you say is probably the biggest misconception that the general public has about bodybuilding in general?
Well, partly that bodybuilders are so strong because they look it. That's not necessarily the case. And especially right before competition, when you do look your most defined, you could probably just blow. And that it's like being a racehorse, that everything has to be so specific. And so, especially towards that last few days and week, you put a certain food in and it's going to affect the body in one way or the other. A big misconception too, it's because we are the organization, the INBA, the PNBA, the natural organizations. I really believe that when you're bodybuilding there, you're doing it for the health reasons. I think everybody starts because they want to be healthier. They want to find something that you talked about cults with CrossFit or so and addictions. And, bodybuilding also, a lot of people at the gym, are coming from what might have been other addictions that were not healthy at all. This becomes a much healthier addiction if you have that type of a personality. The problem is, like with anything, you get a taste of it and, I want to get better. I want to, bigger and better and more this or more that. And that can be unhealthy. So whereas I think when you start getting into bodybuilding, you're coming from a good place, you have to be careful that you don't fall into some of the pitfalls of, well, now I'm going to do some unhealthy things because I think that will allow me to get bigger, get better, get leaner, whatever that may be. And that's where making it a lifestyle and doing things the right way and allowing your body to do what it needs to do, that's how you can make it, be a very healthy thing. So I think where some people think, oh, bodybuilders, it's all steroids, it's all, that's not necessarily the case at all. And I'm a huge advocate for you do what you need to do and what's right for you, regardless. I chose to do things naturally, but I admire the bodies of some of the greats that are out there. And it's just opening your eyes and knowing exactly what you're getting yourself into. I think Rich Piana, I so admired him, bless his heart's no longer with us, but I heard him speak and I was just really floored by his honesty and how he said it all. And at the end of the day, it's completely up to you. You just need to know what it is you're getting into.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, to each their own. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But I mean, make sure you just do your research, because we've heard so many horror stories on here too of people that don't do the research ahead of time. And then they get side effects, they get other things like that they weren't expecting, that they didn't know. So everyone always make sure that you do your research before you do anything. But one thing that I got to ask before we wrap things up, because I mean, all of the guys out there that are listening to this, they're probably asking this question right now, because one of the big areas that guys always like to work on is their biceps. So what do you train for your, literally that's like a language for guys. And anytime I have bodybuilders on here, so what do you train for arms to get them to look the way you look? And what do you recommend for people when starting to see some growth there? Because that is the one area for guys where, I mean, a lot of people that's the one thing that people first look to when they see someone.
When it comes to biceps, don't forget your triceps.
That too, because honestly, when I started growing my triceps, it does make everything look bigger, and it really does help out with that illusion, the triceps.
Sure,
too.
Because if not, and in bodybuilding, so much is an illusion, because you've got this part over here, but if you're flat over here, now if all of a sudden you've got that tricep going along with your bicep, look how much bigger that whole thing looks and feels, and just with the balancing of it, plus being able to do other moves for other parts of your body. But I would say, twice a week at least, kind of thing, and mix it up. Also, if you're trying to grow, I think a combination, sometimes doing the much lower reps, but really going for heavy weights. And then other times to get that pump is going for the 30, 40, even 50 reps with hardly anything, and you are so swollen and you just feel, oh my gosh, and then you lose all definition because your body has so much blood in it. Another thing, and this is again from Rich Piana, because he had, remember, those huge biceps.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember him saying what he would do is secondary workouts just to be able to grow certain specific parts. So let's say he did a bicep workout that morning in the gym. He said that before going to bed at night, he would have a couple of maybe, 5-10 pound dumbbells laying right next to his bed. And he would spend 15 minutes doing literally maybe 100 curls or an exercise just to sort of, it's like going to bed, I'm going to remind you, grow overnight, while I'm sleeping kind of thing. But that would work. So whether it was for biceps or shoulders or whatever it is that he was going to do, and that really helped. And I found that as well, when you do that secondary workout, just brief on whatever body part you did that morning, that really has an effect as well.
I couldn't agree more. And yeah, for anyone out there, yeah, just makes, and again, I always compare it to being like a mad scientist where you're just trying to concoct your own potion and see what works out best for you, because I mean, everyone is so different. But the most important thing when it comes to recovery, and I always say one of my favorite guests that I ever had on was the #1 sleep specialist on the planet. He called all the way from the UK, and first of all, he had one of those British accents where you felt like you gained 10 IQ points just from talking to him, where I just told him, I said, you're just going to talk the entire time and I'm going to listen. But we talked about, the importance of sleep, and especially with bodybuilding. I mean, it is the most important thing when it comes to recovery, but a lot of people have trouble falling asleep, especially this day and age with the technology, which I always tell everyone, close the laptops, turn off the phones about, an hour before you want to go to bed. That really, really helps. But do you ever have any trouble, especially when you're on preps, with sleep? And even if you don't, I mean, I bet you deal with maybe some clients that have trouble. What do you like to recommend for people in order to get that proper amount of sleep? Because it is just such an important thing.
You're very right about the sleep. My husband's a chiropractor. And so one of the biggest things that he gets coming into his clinic are those who, when you can't sleep and the stress and that just creates one thing after another. Plus you need X amount of hours to sleep just for the body to repair itself and just to be able to function the next day. So that's extremely important. I fortunately don't really have, sleep issues that much, which I'm very, very happy about. But I think part of that, number one, it depends on you and your body. For most people, I'd say definitely don't eat a big meal or something like that, a couple of hours before you're going to sleep. Now, for others, for certain clients, it's exactly the opposite, because what might wake them up in the middle of their night is, I'm hungry, so I wake up, and once they wake up, they can't fall back asleep again. So for somebody like that, I would say have something simple that will keep you digesting a little bit throughout the night, such as maybe some egg whites and spinach, so where you have, or a rice cake with peanut butter right before going to bed. And what that does, it's a very slow moving kind of, it'll keep on digesting throughout the night without, giving you indigestion or anything like that. I think also is figuring out what are your sleep cycles. And don't take a nap if you know that you can't sleep later on at night, or how are you? And I look at that individually with different people. When possible, I try not to take any of the sleep meds, so to speak, and try to do it naturally if you can. Once again, a chamomile tea, something herbal that might help you sleep through the night, and not necessarily watching any kind of news on TV or doing too much of this social media stuff right before bed either, because it just gets your mind starting to think about other things. I think also if you work out 2 or 3 hours before bedtime, that's not a good thing either, because your body is revved up. I see that a lot with, it used to be martial arts for me years ago, that I train martial arts at night, and then for the next 3 or 4 hours, you're just wired and you can't. So it's trying to find something that slowly you can, it's about winding down, not gearing up.
My one quick story that I have into that, which really, convinced me so much about the sleep, is that I was in college and I had pulled an all-nighter to study for a final, and I looked at the clock and it's like 7 a.m. and I'm just like, oh crap, I got to get to the gym, because I'd already taken the day off before that. So I went to the gym on 0 hours of sleep. I lasted about 20 minutes and then I just couldn't do it anymore. And that's what really convinced me, where I'm like, okay, it was the hardest 20 minutes of my entire life just trying to work out, just because I was so dead. And I went back to my room, took a nap, and then I finished my workout after that. But yeah, just sleep is just, I don't think it's not talked about as much on social media, which is why I love to bring it up. But it's
and that's a way, to injure yourself, because there are those out there, and even myself included, they say, even if you're not feeling it, just go and work through it at the gym. That's all fine and dandy, but I don't mean, and I don't think people mean work through your heavy, hard workout. If you're going off of zero sleep, you're going to get injured. Your mind and your body are not 100%. So it's one thing to go through and do your cardio, where it's a mindless kind of whatever that you're doing, or to do high rep, very low weight, or just make sure you're not going to injure yourself. But it's not the time to set a PR in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the last question that I have here before we wrap things up is, one thing that I found so great about especially female bodybuilding is that there's just such a great camaraderie between the competitors. And even if you look on Instagram, you see all these compliments that people give each other, just say, wow, you look amazing, you look great, can't wait to see you. Not so much in guy bodybuilding, but in female bodybuilding specifically. What is that like, and how great of a feeling is that to know that people generally care about you, and that there is sort of that camaraderie? Does that really help you get through this lifestyle?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I think in this world, you need support, and accountability are huge. And I think in a way we all keep each other accountable, but at the same time support each other. If you're in this world, how difficult it is. The sacrifices that you're going through. That, life happens, but injuries happen too. And we're all doing, at the end of the day, even backstage, everyone has dieted. Everyone has done the cardio twice a day, 4 in the morning, 5 in the evening. We're all in there working out. So at the end of the day, the only one you compete against is yourself. And just as we talked previously about judging is such a subjective thing that you can't control that. And so at the end of the day, you're out there together. I've been on stages where, I mean, this happened even at the Olympia. These women from all over the world, the Australian champions and the champions from Italy and the champion from New Zealand and then, you know, the US and everywhere. And here we are competing against each other. But before going on, fist pumps and, man, you know, you look beautiful. Let's go kill it out there. And even right after, once you get back again backstage, wow, that was great. You look fantastic. Oh, man, that was so difficult. You know, oh, when I was turning around, I was, you know, all of those things are so important to one another, but they're genuine. Yeah, they really are. And I know, for example, from the competitions that I've done abroad, I could practically go to any continent in the world, and I will know and have some friends who I have competed with or who I know now even from social media, if I haven't, that I could say, hey, I'm coming to Prague, or I'm coming to Melbourne, or wherever that may be. And they say, oh my gosh, you've got to come. They're two Argentine competitors that they're amazing. They're a couple. And actually a few years ago, he proposed to her on stage. Pauli and Matt, and they do mixed pairs as well, and she does all sorts and he does. So they're coming to Dallas now in January, I found out, and I told them, hey, you've got to come over. We'll go to my home away from home destination gym, and we'll share some mate and some good food, and we'll have a workout. So here they are coming from Argentina, coming to Dallas. Get to see them and get to hang out with them. And even though you may see each other very briefly and very few and far between, it's a wonderful thing to be able to have.
And that's one thing that I found about the sport too, because I've talked to people from Sweden, I've talked to people from Honduras, I've talked to people from all over the world, and it's really, I think it's a sport that really does help connect people. So I think that's amazing. And before we wrap things up though, Monica, do you have anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Oh my goodness. Okay, a couple of quick shout outs. I guess Maria Thiako's Goddess Glam suits, amazing. She was, you know, in the 10 years that I've been competing, and I've never had a real Swarovski crystal suit. She's done all my suits. She is absolutely amazing. Did some great stuff for the Olympia. Destination Dallas, official Better Bodies. I love them. Huge shout out to actually, obviously, the Keikos family, and they just bought out, along with Gains in Bulk company, Ironman magazine. And that's a huge thing because Ironman magazine, the December issue, which will go until March, is focusing all on female athletes and bodybuilders. And Ironman is now taking a lot of natural articles and branching out, not just from the bodybuilding side of it, but all athleticism. And it's so, so wonderful to see. I'm very excited, hoping to write even a couple of articles for them as well. I just, you know, shout out to, you know, everyone who even follows, and shout out to all your fans for the great job that you are doing. I love the way that you're giving a platform for so many athletes from so many, whether it's bodybuilding or other areas as well, to be able to come on and talk and voice their views and share some of their life and information.
I really appreciate that. And yeah, you find people from all different walks of life. And like you said, one thing that I've really discovered is, you know, it's really gave me a lot more sympathy too, because we have had, you know, so many people that maybe they had like eating disorders or stuff like that before they started competing. And you just really see how, you know, just you can make that change. And anything for inspiration that I mean, I love to put on this podcast, and you're inspiring enough as yourself. Okay, you're 54 years old and you don't look a day over like 25. I mean, I'm 25, Jesus. And it's just ridiculous. That's why, I mean, I always hate having the older people on, because they just put me to shame and they serve as my motivation. But yeah, honestly, just keep doing what you're doing, because I know that you inspire and motivate so many people. And is there any last thing that you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
You know, just always dream bigger. I truly, truly believe in that. And, you know, you just have to find, I talk a lot about purpose. I talk a lot about, you know, adaptation. And I talk a lot about, you know, finding you, and it's okay to change things up. And never stop dreaming, and never stop dreaming bigger. You know, we can do so much.
Well, on top of that, I want to really just embarrass everyone before we wrap things up. Could you take that sweater off and give us a gun show? Give us a flex so we can just
Yes, sir. Okay.
embarrass everyone here. Oh God. All right, everyone. Yeah, we all need to immediately go and hit the gym now because that's just ridiculous. But again, you guys, Monica, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And everyone out there, thank you for listening and have a great day.